expectations. I mean, I was just kind of playing that up because, yeah. She is an awesome cook, though, by the way. She makes me amazing meals. I love it. But guys and girls are different, and we have different expectations. The way we think about like love and dating and swords and Spider-Man posters like are different, right? We value different things. The list goes on and on. And so tonight we're going to talk a little bit about differences, a little bit about purity and God's standard for relationships, and also about marriage. Because we don't want to just give a purity talk. We want to give a marriage talk, right? Because that's the goal of any relationship that we enter into that's a dating relationship, is marriage. And so if we're not preparing for marriage, if we don't have a good picture of marriage, then we might not value it, we might not work towards it, we might end up like another statistic, another person who's shacking up, who's living with their boyfriend or girlfriend, and they ain't thinking about marriage. I mean, I work with kids in the inner city who their lives are wrecked because of broken homes. Their lives are wrecked because dudes have walked away saying, that's not my responsibility, you take care of the baby. Peace. And they still don't get it. They still don't get it. Like these guys I'm mentoring, 17, 18, they're still out there wanting to just hook up with these girls, right? And have sex with them and use them and do whatever they want, and they don't get it in their head. This is a cycle. This just keeps happening. See, because we can't learn these things out in the culture. You can't learn these things by watching movies, right? Because if you do, they don't show you the consequences. They don't show you some of the damage. We all know that, right? I hope we do. And so where do we turn? We got to turn to God's Word. It's got a lot of good stuff in it. And see, here's the deal. You guys ever heard that old nursery rhyme? Or it's not really nursery rhyme, but first comes love,
then comes marriage,
then comes a baby and a baby cares. So that, in our culture, at least when our parents were growing up, and baby will be on the way.
He's not making an announcement.
Eventually, we're going to have babies. Lots of babies. And, but you see, that's changed today. And I want to sing you a little song more relevant to today and how our culture sees the process going. First comes sex, then comes baby, then I'll propose. Well, someday, maybe. There's a big difference there, huh? The order is off. And we come here today not saying we have everything figured out or everything was perfect, because we made a lot of mistakes. And you guys know that I didn't become a Christian until I was 18. And so before that, there was a lot of brokenness that was in me. And that spilt out into my relationships. And I wasn't the kind of guy who honored women. I wasn't the kind of guy who had that self-control, because I didn't fear God. I didn't know what God said about this. And I stand before you today, though, a changed man and a new man. And the story we tell today is that new man living out the principles that God has taught me. And each and every one of you, if you've made a commitment to Christ, you're new in Christ. The old is gone, the new has come. And we talked about that a little bit last night as my brother came up here and just talked about how God gives us his righteousness. And a lot of times I had to claim that righteousness because a lot of the stuff I've done is very shameful to me. And I'm not going to go into detail the things I've done tonight, but I've done some things that are very, very shameful in this arena. But I come tonight, a new man, celebrating the things that God has done in and through Vanessa and I, in our courtship, and in our dating and in our marriage. And so tonight we're going to talk about God writing your love story. Because God can write your love story. Right? We talked about how, in the beginning of the week, how God prepares good works in advance for us. That He's very intentional. That we can seek His will. Well, His will is so much better than ours. The story He can write is so much better than one we can write. So when we give God the pen and let Him write our love story, He can write something that's so beautiful. So incredibly beautiful. And Vanessa and I, we're going to just share about how that process went of giving God our love story tonight. And,
So the reason why I'm here, right? I'm sure you're all wondering. I mean, Evan could tell you this whole story, but let's be honest, there's two sides to every story, right? So my job is to just keep him honest, make sure he tells you all the facts, that he wasn't just this stud that came in on the horse and swept me off my feet. But the story behind us and our love relationship and how it started and how it went, and we were just talking as we were talking about what we were going to share and things like that, and realizing that it doesn't matter. I met Evan when I was 24 years old, and it doesn't matter if you're 14 or 24, dating is still awkward. It's still the same kind of relationship. Like, you have those firsts together, like the first time he holds your hands, right? It happens when you're 24 or 25, not just when you're 15, okay? And then there's the first time that, like, I brought him home to meet my parents, right? You remember the first time you brought somebody home to meet your parents? Big deal, right? It's still a big deal, even when you're 24 years old. So there were all these firsts that we experienced together, and Evan still had to ask me out, right? Like, I just want you to realize it doesn't matter if you're 15 or if you're dating when you're 25. All those same steps still have to be there. And I remember the day that I was actually flying home from Detroit. I was flying from Detroit back to Las Vegas, and Evan came to pick me up from the airport. And I'm always starving when I get off of the plane. Like, that time in the air does something to your stomach. Are you with me? Amen. So we're flying, right? And I get there, and Evan comes to pick me up, and he's like, "Oh, I made you a lunch." Isn't that so sweet? Right? So he made me this lunch because I'm always so hungry when I get off the plane. And so I took it, and a friend of his called and said, "Hey, we just flew in. I heard you're picking up Vanessa. Can you pick us up too?" And Evan's like, "Sure. You don't have to open your lunch now, right?" And I was like, "Okay, well, just wait till after they get out of the car to open your lunch." I'm like, "Okay." So we picked up his friends, we brought them home, and we went back to my apartment. And I'm like, "Can I eat my lunch now? Like, I'm starving. I'm not that girl with no appetite. Like, I want to eat my food." So I dump out this lunch bag, and out of it falls a note. And the note said, "Will you be my girlfriend? Circle one yes or no, and take two it with a crayon." Take two it with a crayon. And I circled. Do you remember, those of you who were here last year, I told you that my first love note I ever received said circle one yes or no, and I wrote the word maybe, and I gave it back to the guy. Not with Evan. I said yes, and I gave it back to him. And so that was kind of how our dating relationship started. So, I mean, you experience, whether you're dating as a teenager or whether you're dating as an adult, you still go through the same process. And so I just wanted to kind of make that relevant to you, that we had to go through just the awkward talk together. We had to go through all these different things together that you go through at the same time. And I kind of think as you get older, sometimes they get more awkward because less people are having the conversations, less people are doing and taking the steps that are really necessary, that they should be taking in order to date someone, in order to marry someone, in order to begin that process. Less and less people are taking those steps. So I think they kind of get more awkward as we get older. but we went through that same dating process that many of you are going through. You still call your girlfriends up and you're like, oh my gosh, I have a crush. Do you think he likes me too? Like the same thing happens as an adult.
And yeah, I did write that note. That's the thing about God, right? Like, he says you got to become like a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. And there's the sense that God, when you follow him, like, he restores purity. And I never did that stuff even when I was a kid. It was like Rico Suave type stuff. But just to be like just a kid again and do that kind of stuff was fun. Well, here's the thing. We're all at different stages. Some of us have dated before, some of us haven't. Tonight, we want to give you a picture of what this looks like. So if you're thinking, man, I'm like so far off from getting married, and like, why do you even bring this up tonight? Here's the thing. It starts today in your preparation for marriage. Because it's not a thing where you can just kind of just go with the flow. Because if you go with the flow, it's going to end up
in the flow.
Messy, right? It's just going to be messy. And because you're just going to jump in and it's going to be messy. But if you get ready and you build a nice little craft, right, like a little boat, and you get in, you're very intentional about rowing in the right direction, right? Like you're going somewhere. Well, for those, of you who are like, man, this is way off, man, I don't know. Like that's how I felt. Because I actually didn't start dating until I was a senior in high school. I was awkward, like, you heard that I shared that I had a self-confidence issue. That was me in high school. And when I became a Christian, though, I started hanging around with guys that knew God, that feared God. Not just guys that went to church, but guys that truly feared God and wanted to live for him. And dudes, for real, if you want to succeed in this thing, you got to get some of those guys in your life. You really, really do. Because the text, man, it's clear, but the application sometimes isn't. Because we get mixed up with our emotions, right? We get mixed up with, like, oh man, I like this person. I want this person. I'm in this. Let's do this. And if we don't have someone like just checking us, just looking in, we just can get out of control and drift away from the text. And so, guys, get some dudes who fear God. Same with you, women. Get some women in your life that fear God. It's one of the very first things I checked out when I was checking out Vanessa's world. Who is she friends with? Does she get real with people? Does she just have guy friends? Because I had girls that I knew, they didn't have any girlfriends. They said, oh, I don't really like click with girls. I just have, I'm friends with guys. Red flag. Like, red flag, I'm just saying. Because, one, I don't want her being in this like tight relationship with a guy that I'm stepping into, one. Two, girls know girls. And they can call girls on some stuff that guys can't, right? Girls can go all like, what are you, seriously, right now? Where guys can't, right? Like, they just don't see that stuff. And for her to have these godly girls in her life, awkwardly, like I went on a semi-blind date with her best friend, right before, yeah. But I knew, like, at least from that, I knew this girl was solid, that she was friends with. And, anywho, all that to say, get someone in your life. Well, let's get into the text and see what the text says. 1 Timothy 5 is where we're going to be right now.
I'm so confused. Wait, what was it again?
1 Timothy.
Timothy?
1 Timothy chapter 5.
Timothy, I don't think I'm looking at the right one. Oh,
Here it is.
1084. Psalms 777801.
New Testament.
Joel.
New Testament.
John. Wait, no, am I too far?
Nope, you don't.
I can't tell.
Okay,
Okay.
that very first bit right there, verse 1. Here's Paul talking to, Paul's like a mentor to Tim.
Wait, what was it?
And Tim's a pastor. He started the church.
I forgot.
And Paul's this dude. He's writing him a letter. And he's giving some instructions about really how you should treat other people. And here's his instructions. Very, very practical instructions. It says, first it says, do not rebuke an older man harshly, but exhort him as if he were your father. So first he's saying, if someone's older than you, like, you respect them. You know, don't go up like, yeah. Anyway. So, next it says what? It says, treat younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, and younger women as sisters. What's the next part? With
Absolute purity.
With absolute purity. Not just with a little purity, with absolute purity. Okay, so if we take this text and we apply it, girls, you're to treat these guys as brothers, okay? With absolute purity, okay? Guys, you're to treat these girls as sisters with absolute purity, okay? Does that make sense? Because when I first read that, I was like, that's a high standard. And how am I, we called tonight's kind of talk what? You remember?
Don't be a flirt.
Yeah, not a flirt. Okay? I learned a lesson very early on about flirting. Here's the deal. And I'm putting this stuff out there. It might be controversial, whatever. But I discovered that by flirting, I wasn't honoring the sisters in my life. And I didn't, a lot of times, realize how harmful that was because I just thought, man, I'm just being nice. I'm just playing around. Right, guys? Like, you play around, like you might, like, go up and, like, grab a girl, or you might, like, you know, whatever, guys do stuff. And I was, you know, being a flirt and thinking nothing of it. Well, I was leading girls on. I was sending a message to these girls that I was kind of into them when I wasn't realizing it. And so these girls were kind of getting like, oh, you know, who's this guy, you know? And I'm totally clueless. And all of a sudden I get smacked in the face because a girl comes up to me and says, do you know that such and such thinks that you're like into her? And I'm like, really? I'm not into her. What do you mean? Like you're smiling at her, you're spending time with her, you're like, you know, eating lunch with her all the time. Don't you see? And I'm like, no. And I realized that I wasn't treating these girls in my life with absolute purity and with respect. And I was just clueless. Alright? Clueless. And so guys, watch it. Girls, watch it. Because flirting is fun and all, but if we want to treat each other as brothers and sisters, you don't flirt with your brother. You don't flirt with your sister. Like, it's kind of gross. You know, like you have fun, you're friends, but there's boundaries to the things you do. So, so that's tonight kind of our standard, right? God says absolute purity. What does that look like? That's what we're talking about. You know, there's different standards out there, and we're just going to talk about kind of our story, the standards God kind of put in our life.
So this is where you find out just how different guys and girls are. Evan and I got the chance, I think it was like, 2 weeks before we got married. I run after-school programs in middle schools, and so we got a chance to go and speak at the middle school. Evan took all the guys, I took all the girls, and we were talking about love and relationships right around Valentine's Day. And we split up, guys and girls, and I took all the girls in one place, and Evan took all the guys to the other, and I asked the girls, I'm like, what do you guys think of when you think about love? You know, like, oh, I think about like when your heart beats fast and just like when you kiss, and I think about like just that feeling that like overtakes you, and I think about dating, and I think about all this stuff, right? And I said, what do you think that the guys are talking about right now? Because they're talking about love. What do you think that they're talking about? And they're like, well, we don't know. So at the very end of our session, we asked the guys when they came back, okay, we have the same topic. We were both told, you're going to go talk about love and dating. The boys came back and were like, what did you guys learn? What was your takeaway? Don't fart on a date. I mean, now I agree. I'm saying I don't agree. I don't disagree. But our thoughts are different. We're wired different, right? The girls just get this overwhelming feeling, right? It's about that feeling. It's about, we've watched a lot of Disney movies. We know what it means to be a princess. We know what it means to be rescued. Guys, this is what you're up against. Go home and watch The Little Mermaid, okay? This is what you're up against. And so there's all these different, these feelings that girls have and these expectations. And so that's where I was. I mean, I was this girl who had these standards of, I want to be treated with respect. I want a guy to come in and whisk me away. I want him to chase after my heart, and I'm going to just keep on going until he catches up with me, right? And so that was my thought. And but my prayer was really for God to protect my heart against the pre-Jesus Evans. Right? The Evan that was in high school, like God had a story written for us, because had I met him earlier in life, good Lord, the boy didn't have a chance. Seriously. He was totally in a different category. I wouldn't have even been interested, attracted, nothing. And so God is writing this story that you want to walk the story as God's writing it with his pen. You don't want to jump ahead. You don't want to write your own story, right, and become the one who's pursuing all these guys and chasing after guys. That's not the way God writes these stories. And so I would have never been interested in a guy like Evan earlier on. And really my standard and my value in just saving myself for marriage and for that purity, it became so important to me. I received a ring that I got on my 16th birthday that my sister had worn, that had been in our family for a long time. It was a purity ring. And my sister received it, and I remember standing on the platform next to her on her wedding day. She had given me that ring, and I had it on my hand. And she was singing a song to her husband on her wedding day that she's waited her whole life for this one person. And it was that just spoke to my heart. I said, I want that. This ring isn't going to just be a ring of empty promises. This ring is going to be my commitment. And it really set a precedence. And sometimes I think we forget what a mentor and what a role model can do in someone's life. And I wore that ring out of a commitment that I had made to God. I wore that ring out of a commitment that I made to my parents, that I had made to my future spouse. But I had made a commitment to the younger generation in my life, that I was going to uphold this standard that God had written in his word, and I was going to make a visual symbol for other people to see. And so I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but just a smidget. I wrote a journal for Evan, and I started writing it when I was 16. And in that journal, I wrote to him, I'm wearing a ring on my finger. And I'm wearing it so that every time someone asks me, that's a beautiful ring, where did you get it? I can tell them about the promise that I made to you. And sometimes it's so important for us to have those visual reminders, those things that, and I know specifically for girls, that we talk a lot to each other. And so the more people we can invite into that accountability in our lives, the better off it is. And so on my walk in purity, I would go out and I would do speaking engagements on purity when I was single, all the time. You need to talk about purity, I'll come and talk about purity. I have 1,500 girls that now hold me accountable to the standard I said that I had, because I went out and told people that this is the standard God's called me to, and I'm committed to it. The more people do not keep that promise, that commitment a secret, because it's so much harder. Evan was talking about get some dudes in your life, get some sisters too, People who are going to walk with you and ask you about that commitment that you've made.
And that's the truth. Girls are looking for their prince. And see, girls, right, you don't want to marry a boy. You want to marry a man.
Amen.
So that's where, when we talk about relationships, the weight really does fall on the men. Because men are to take the lead in relationships. Girls, you never should be asking a guy out. You never should be saying, oh, where are we at in our relationship? Guys always should be taking the lead, and always should be leading in things like the DTR. Isn't that what that is? Define the relationship topic. The DTR. Some call it in college, sorry. Well, the DTR, like, where are we at? Like, where are we going? Are we Facebook official yet?
We had that conversation.
We did. Tonight, let's do it. Let's get on Facebook together.
1, 2, 3. Status change.
21st century dating. So when we talk about these things, guys, we have a weight on our shoulders to become the type of men that would attract the type of women that we truly do want as in our lives, right? As the mother of our children, right? That can set that example. And so, in our single years, right, like we just go after God. We love Him. We get in community. We go hard after Him. And then, we kind of keep our radar up, right? Like, my friends used to make fun of me for this, but like, an air traffic controller, right? They have this, like, thing that sweeps around. Right, and then, like, these little blips will come on the map. Well, that's how, at least me as a single guy, like, how I function, right? Like, not really, like, all over the place, like, looking for a girl, but, like, all of a sudden, I'll be like, beep, beep, oh, hi. And I investigate. And it's okay to investigate, guys, right? You want to check her out? Like, thank you. And see what's up? Well, and I mean, I talked to a guy today on the work side. We were talking about relationship stuff, and he's like, how do I tell if she's a Christian or not, right? Because that's one of the first things we want to find out in our investigation into who this girl is, if she pops up on our radar. Because we can't really tell, like, if she just goes to church, she's, like, legit. Because we know, right, my second night here, I explained that you can have all these qualities, but yet not be authentic Christians. So you ask questions, you, like, see what's going on in their world, you check out their friends, and girls, remember this, if you have friends that are messy and all over the place, and a guy comes in your life and sees that, it might be a red flag for them. Just saying. If you're pouring into those girls, that's one thing. You got to have some strong woman in your life. That's something I look to, and I looked around for when I was searching for Vanessa. Well, one day she popped up, on my radar, and I'd gone to her church just to recruit for volunteers for Club Christ. Right?
Find a wife.
Any opportunity to be at a different church is a good chance to keep your radar open, right? So I saw her walk by, and I was like, oh, who is that? I asked my friend, and she was like, oh, that's Vanessa. She's cool. Like, she's a public speaker and does all this stuff. And I'm like, really? And how she just carried herself, how she walked up to people with confidence and knew them, and obviously was involved in the church, piqued my interest. And so my investigation didn't end there, though. Because these days, we have a tool called Facebook. And her profile is really public, thankfully. And so...
Everybody's my friend.
Right.
Like, you want to be my friend? Come on in.
Yep.
It's a party.
We actually have a competition over who has more friends on Facebook. She's now beating me by like 200
friends.
How many friends do you have now?
Like 1,700.
She's around 1,700. I'm just saying, if you want to, come on my side, I kind of need to catch up. Evan Hartsell, Facebook.
What do we want to be both?
All right, so I started checking her out, and you learn a lot about girls on Facebook, and yeah.
Well, some call it like Facebook, checking them out. I call it stalking because girls do feel me on that one. Because Evan, what he failed to mention was that he did not peruse my Facebook site alone. Him and all of his roommates would come and sit on the couch and gather around, and they're like clicking through all my pictures. And then there was somebody that wrote like, "Hey Vanessa, hope you're doing great," a guy. So they then went and stalked him to make sure it wasn't a guy that I was interested in. How many comments have we had that for? This is stalking. And I know it now.
Investigating.
I know it now because his roommates are all still single, so when they meet a girl, I now get to go sit on the couch with all of them and check out their pictures. It's a lot of fun. But so Evan totally, before we had had a conversation, but I just have to admit that I don't remember our first 2 conversations ever.
We did meet twice. That's why in the video I was like, yeah, we met at church. And she's like, we met at Starbucks.
I don't remember ever meeting him.
That day, I made a depression.
But before we had ever had like a real conversation with one another, Evan already knew so much about me. And whether it was stalking or investigating or whatever you want to call it, the reality is that is a tool that's out there. And that is a tool that people are using to get to know you. And one thing that Evan knew about me before we had ever had that conversation was obviously if I had a relationship with God, at least on a surface level. He knew that, right? Hello, religious views, right? It's on there. You write what you believe. And there's all these different things that he could see. But one of the things that I think girls take for granted so much and don't realize is what pictures they post on Facebook. Because, and this might sound just silly and off the wall, but Evan knew before we had a conversation how much respect I demanded. Because I wasn't showing anything off on Facebook. There was no way. There was no pictures of me up in, my bathing suit or my belly hanging out or my booty hanging out or none of that. He knew, because I think we forget that however much we're willing to give away for free on Facebook, that's just a little indicator for guys of how much respect we really think that we deserve. And so I know that it's silly. It's Facebook. You're like, I can put whatever pictures I want up there. You're right. You can. But just know that if you're using your body to attract the opposite sex, the only thing you're going to catch are body snatchers. The only thing that is going to come along are people who are interested in your body. If you're using your faith to attract the opposite sex, if you're chasing after God, if you've got a heart that you're doing ministry and you're reaching out and your focus and content is on God, you're going to attract someone who's interested in your faith and who is attracted to your faith. And one of my friends, a friend that I kind of met through the grapevine, she came to a ministry event that I was having. We pass out backpacks and school supplies at schools, and we were doing our big assembly program and to pass out all the supplies, and she had invited a friend to come with her. And she walked over and she introduced me as, oh, this is Vanessa. Remember I was telling you, she's the girl that used her singleness as a ministry. I had never heard that before. And I thought, wouldn't that, I would love for that to be true, and that convicted me, like I got a lot of work to do, but wouldn't it be great if that's really truly how we saw it? That our single years were our opportunity for ministry? Because let me tell you, this man's a lot of work. And I say that in all honesty, and I'm a lot of work. And when you get married, your ministry comes to this other person, and one day Evan and I will have lots and lots and lots of babies, as he says, and those babies will be a lot of work, and that will become my ministry. Evan will be my my ministry, and all of a sudden the world is number 3 now on my list. And when you're single, you have an opportunity for that to be your ministry. And if you're so busy and so occupied with ministry, you're going to catch a guy who's interested in ministry. A guy who's interested in serving Jesus and loving Jesus. So I just want you to think back. You can probably role play through the pictures you have posted on Facebook. And who are the people that you're attracting in those by posting those? What are the first things someone notices when they look through your pictures? What are the first things someone notices when they look at your status updates? What kind of language do you use on there? It's such a silly thing, but I can guarantee you, had I posted one picture like the one I'm describing, Evan and I would not even have had a conversation. Because it was my desire to be the person that Evan was looking for without knowing Evan, the type of person. And it was Evan's desire to be the type of guy that a girl like Vanessa was looking for. And had that not been true simply on Facebook, then our relationship wouldn't have gone anywhere. If you're looking for a good godly man or a good godly woman, make sure that the things that you're using to attract them are good and are godly. Oh, yeah. And I also want to just take a look. You're already open to 1 Timothy. So look at 1 Timothy 2. First Timothy 2, verse 9. It says, I also want women to dress modestly, with decency and propriety, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or expensive clothes, but with good deeds, appropriate for women who profess to worship God. That your good deeds are to be the things that attract that other person. That the fact that you profess to worship God should be reflected in the way that you show yourself to the world.
Yeah, and kind of funny that when I started Facebook stalking, or investigating, Vanessa was on a mission trip to Africa. I mean, she was serving God in Africa. I don't know about you guys, but there's something hot about a girl carrying like a little African child in her arms, smiling. Like, I don't know. That's just hot to me. Okay, so, right. So I waited a little bit, then I friended her, and like she said, she pretty much accepts almost anyone. She's more careful now, because I'm like, you can't. Who is this guy? Anyways. But she said yes and friended me on Facebook, and I sent her a message. It was like, hey, let's do coffee. Let's talk about ministry. What?
He gave me a brochure on our coffee date. I didn't know it was a date.
It wasn't a date. It was an investigative meeting.
Can you tell how romantic?
Interrogation, right. So, at that meeting, I learned about LifeChangers. That was one of the first things that actually attracted me to Vanessa, was the fact that she had done urban ministry. She had gone into the city and worked with kids from the hood. Because guess what? That's what I do every single day. And so for her to get that was huge, right? Because it's like the 3 C's. You ever heard of that?
Content,
That you're looking
commerce,
for, the 3
community.
C's. First, you want to make sure you're looking for character in that other person. Second, you want to make sure that, right, there's chemistry between you two, that you guys jive. And the third, your calling, right? Like what you're doing with your life. Are you on a path to use your marriage for ministry? Well, that was something that was high on my list, and I looked for that. Well, then we started hanging out, and it was just in groups. And I really recommend, if you're just in that early stage, to not go off by yourself for hours on end, but to really see how each other interact in a group. So I invited her over for a game night. We played Cranium and Lost, I remember. Yeah. But it was cool because it was very low-key, got to know her, got to know some of her friends that way, same with her. She got to know me. So we did a number of those things, and we were just jiving. We were jiving. We liked each other. There was even a time when I threw out a fleece. You guys ever heard of that? I don't know. My friends in college talked about it a lot. What? Yes, Gideon. Putting a fleece out, it's very dangerous. I wouldn't recommend it to everyone. But for some reason, God, and I had this deal worked out where I was going to a
hip-hop concert.
A hip-hop concert, a Lecrae concert. And, it was in the house. It was a whole 116 click, actually. And so she
does not listen to hip-hop.
She had no idea who this person was. Who? And I was like, Lecrae. And she's like, okay. I listen to country music. And I was like, that's cool too. I like some country. And I was like, hey, if you want to come, it's this Saturday. I'm taking some of my kids from Club Christ. We've got an extra ticket. And I just left it at that. And that was my fleece. I said, God, if you want me to kind of move forward in this, and this is kind of something you want me to do, it was just kind of my sign that I was asking God for. And I said, if she shows up, and I was really doubting. I was like, she's not going to show up. Like, no way. She shows up at the concert, and I was like, okay. I didn't throw any fleeces after that. I'm not all about, like, asking for signs. But that was just something I needed, just to make sure I was on the right track. But the other thing that happened, after I figured out this girl I want to pursue, is I said, if I'm going to date this girl, who's the first person I'm going to go to for their blessing? God. First I'm going to approach God because God is her father, has been providing for her and loving her and looking after her for her whole life. Well, if that's the first person, then who's the second person? Her real dad. You've heard of, right, guys asking the father permission to marry their daughter. Well, have you heard of guys asking permission to date their daughter?
Yes.
It happens. And it was something I had talked about with my guy friends, and, we were like, we had heard it in a sermon once. We were just like, man, that's legit. Because that shows ultimate respect and honor. And that's truly how they used to do it. There wasn't this, you dating in private. It was a very much thing. You included a covering. And for me, I knew Vanessa had that in her life. She had a father, she had a mother at home. Some girls don't, okay? Some girls won't have a father at home. Some girls just had complete brokenness in their family, right? Then approach someone in their church who's a covering, whether that be their pastor, a certain mentor, someone in their life, right, has to be pouring into that person. And for me, it was Papa Ben. And Wayne is an awesome guy, but I didn't know that. I had never met him before. This is just, all I knew is this is Vanessa's dad, who's a pastor, right? And so I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? He lives in Michigan. I live in Las Vegas. Yeah, I'm not going to just drive there. So what I did was I said, she was going home for Thanksgiving. I said, Vanessa, I want to talk to your parents. And she was like,
I was scared to death. I know. I'm like, is he going to ask my dad to marry me? What does he want to talk to my dad
she was a little
for?
confused, but I just assured her it's okay. I just want to talk to them. It's cool. So what happened was we set up a Skype appointment. And so they got their little camera, and it took like 15 minutes for them to set it up.
We're a little not tech savvy in
Right.
the Van family.
So they set it up, and I'm waiting, like, okay, come on, and so...
He's all dressed up. And impress the folks.
Of course. So what I did was, Wayne and Pam were there, and I asked, I was talking and stuff, and I asked Vanessa to leave the room.
Scary.
Right. So I asked her to leave, and I said, look, here I am. My name's Evan, I do this ministry in Las Vegas. These are my intentions with your daughter. She's really great. I want to pursue her, and I want to date her, and I really want you guys' blessing. Well, what happened next, I didn't really prepare for. It really took me off guard, because Wayne turns to me and he says, Evan, he's like, I heard a lot of good things about you. And if any of those things are not true, he turns around and he picks up a shotgun and the camera and just goes, and I'm like, oh my God. I peed my pants a little bit, I think, and we laughed, and it was a good time.
It was an awkward laugh. Everyone was like,
Hey, for real, did this not happen?
All I could hear Evan say was, yeah.
I was like, yeah. Wow.
I didn't expect that.
Wow. So, what was your take on that whole thing?
well, I had never had a guy ask my parents for permission to date me, ever. Even when I was, a teenager, if I was dating someone in the church, if I was dating someone out of the church, it didn't matter. I'd never had that happen before. But what Evan did in that moment was a lot more than just ask my dad for permission, although he did that. And that was that he made a promise to my dad that he would respect me. And he did that for accountability purposes for him and for me, but he did it for him. That he had promised my dad that he would respect me. And that at any time, if Evan and I felt that this wasn't the direction that God was leading us in, that we would break up. And he told my dad that from the beginning, that if we feel like God isn't in this, that God isn't leading this, our relationship will be over. And I can tell you that I will have no intentions of hurting your daughter by any means. And if there was one word that I would really choose to describe our relationship from the very beginning, it was intentional. It was incredibly intentional. That there was no well, let's see where this goes. This guy's cute. I've done that before. And you don't know where you're going. And that's when you have to ask the questions where's our relationship going? How do you feel about me? Right? Those things that girls especially, we ask ourselves those things. And are we supposed to ask the guy, what, do you like me? How is this going? Where is this going? Never once did I have to ask that question, because Evan was intentional the whole way, and he pursued my heart the entire way. And he had made that commitment to my parents that he would respect me. And so that night when I had come into Las Vegas, that's when I received his note asking me to be his girlfriend. But then as we kept dating, I was getting a little worried, because here we had been dating, and the guy had yet to kiss my lips. And I was getting a little nervous. Maybe he doesn't find me attractive. Maybe he sees me as a good friend and not and I'm all this stuff is going on in my head, and I'm oh, maybe I'm completely off course. Maybe I'm wanting to kiss this guy, make out with this guy, and God's that's not what I'm doing right now. Maybe I'm the one that's pushing things. I don't know what's going on. And so I thought about it, and I was getting ready to go over to Evan's house. He was making dinner. And I was really nervous, because I felt like I had this, just this knot in my heart that was just you need to have the awkward talk. The awkward talk, where are your boundaries? Where do you want to kiss me? Do you want to hold my hand? Do you want, what? This is awkward for everybody, and I'm oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to have this conversation, but it was really bothering me. And I didn't want to lead physically in our relationship at all. And so I was but I'm going to just have to ask him where his boundaries are and all this stuff. And so when Evan and I started dating, God totally just poked my heart and kind of just told me to keep a journal of all the big events that happened in our life. And so, I just kept a separate journal on the side that when things happen in our relationship, I jotted it down. Well, it was really cool because I got to give Evan that journal on the day that he proposed to me and say, like, that you think you know what happened in your relationship, in our relationship? Let me tell you what really happened in our relationship. So I kept this little diary. Well, one of them, it was titled Bug Soup and the Awkward Talk. Because I went to his house for dinner that night, and Evan's making dinner, and he was making, he says it takes a child to enter into the kingdom of heaven, all that stuff. He was making soup out of noodles in the shape of bugs. And so he was making me bug soup for dinner. And I'm like sweating bullets, like, oh my gosh, I have to bring this up. What am I going to say? And so I was like, Evan, I really want to talk to you about something. And he's like, hold on, I'm making dinner. Because Evan doesn't really multitask really super well. And so he's making dinner, and I'm just like sweating, and I'm like, I don't want to talk about anything else. I just need to get this out. And this is internal monologue, girls, you understand. These words weren't coming out at all half of up here. And so Evan sits down, and I was like, I wanted to talk to you about something. And he said, I wanted to talk to you about something too. And he proceeded to have the entire awkward talk with me. I didn't even have to do it. And so do you want to talk a little bit about that awkward talk?
Sure.
Let's get awkward, right? Get ready. It's about to get awkward.
This is something I thought about. Guys, when you get into Christian communities, you get into your 20s especially, you start talking about dating a lot, right? And the things you're going to do when you're dating and not. Well, I talked a lot about this kind of stuff with my friends. Well, I also listen to Focus on the Family. Great. I recommend it to everyone. It does talk a lot about family, but throughout all my single years, I was just loving it. I ate it up. And I still do. So one of the guys on there was talking about kissing. He talked about kissing, and he said, you know what kissing is? He said, kissing is like an on-ramp to a freeway. And not everyone drives in here, so you might not picture that, but when I picture it, I think this one on-ramp coming on the freeway out of Club Christ, and it's just like this short little bit, right? It's this short little bit that the only thing you do on an on-ramp is accelerate. That's what it's designed for. It gives you that time to get onto the freeway. So you put your foot on the gas and you accelerate, you go forward. And you don't turn around on an on-ramp. That's not a place you turn around. You go forward. And he said, kissing is a lot like that. Because God designed kissing to be an on-ramp for other things. Because once you get married, you'll discover kissing is an on-ramp for other things. Not to be awkward or anything, but it is. And so, but I had also practically discovered that because I had dated before, right? And I had kissed in those relationships. And I knew that when I started kissing, when I started making out with a girl that I was dating, it's just like this automatic thing that you kick into this autopilot, and your hands start going places, right? You start just moving your head to side, and you start pulling that person closer to you, and it just, right? It just is that on-ramp. You want to proceed. And that's why if any of you have been in that position, you felt how hard it is to push away when you've already started to do that, right? How hard it is to put the brakes on. And often it's one person, right, who just constantly has to put the brakes on. And I didn't want to put her in that position, to have to put the brakes on me. I didn't want us to ever be in a place where we're at a place of shame because we did something that was dishonoring to each other and to God. And so for me, what I decided to do was make that a boundary. Okay? Long before I met Vanessa, I even put this in place in the relationship I had before I dated Vanessa. And I said, I'm not going to kiss to my wedding day. I have kissed before this, but I made that stand. From here on, I'm not going to kiss before my wedding day. And that was to protect me and to protect her. Because I realized that I don't trust myself. And guys, I hope you don't trust yourselves. And we'll talk a little bit about this tomorrow night, but temptation is crazy. I thought being strong, like the Bible describes, like, you got to be a strong man of God. I thought being strong was meant like you're in the middle of temptation. You're in the middle of like a hurricane, and you're standing there like, yeah, I'm resisting. Yeah. But the Bible doesn't describe strength in that way. Paul says, when I am weak, then I am strong. When you recognize your areas of weakness and avoid those things, when you have self-control over those areas, that is when you're strong. So for guys to admit, man, I'm weak in this. Man, I don't trust myself in this. That actually shows strength. Not to say, oh, I'm going to get in it and, I'll have the strength to not go all the way, or to not, put my hands there, to not do this or that. That's not strength. It's stepping back and realizing that, it's not how close to the line you can get. That's not what God calls us to. It's how far you can stay away from that line of compromise. And I told her this, and I was like, yeah, this is kind of where I'm at.
And to be honest, I was like, say what? Like, that was not a boundary for me. Really. I mean, like, that was not a boundary for me at all. I've been in dating relationships. I've kissed guys before, and Evan told me that, and I was like, oh, well, at least my self-confidence went up a little bit, because the guy hasn't, even snuck a smooch once. Like, at least, I got something there. But I was not excited. I was not thrilled. There was nothing in me that was like, oh, good. I was sitting there like, this is not fun. I mean, that was my first thought. Like, this, why would we do that? That doesn't even make sense. But what I knew was that I'd seen it, that Evan was taking a lead in our relationship. That he was saying, this is the boundary I have. And from that, I learned in relationships, you always go to the closest person's boundaries. Because a lot of times I think, we know what the other person's boundary is, but that's not my boundary, and so I'm just going to go until the other person says stop. That wasn't our goal. Our goal was, the minute either one of us thought that was even an option, it's time to go home. At the age of 25 and 28, we had a 10:30 curfew. Every night. 10:30, that was the cutoff. Evan, you gotta go home now. Vanessa, you gotta go home now. It's 10:30. Nothing good happens after 10:30. That was our cutoff. And I say that because, you're anywhere from 12 to 18 and you're thinking, my mom and dad give me a curfew. Well, when you get older, you start giving yourself a curfew. It's crazy. Because I knew, and Evan knew, that if we truly wanted to keep this commitment, that we were going to have to put bumpers up. That we were going to have to make sure that not one of us was committed to the boundary, both of us were committed to the boundary. And if at any time my goal wasn't to lure Evan into a trap, but instead to keep him far, far away from the place he didn't want to go. Was it hard?
Yes.
Of course it was hard. We loved each other, right? We're entered into this time of engagement. We're engaged to each other. And we still haven't kissed each other. Now we know that we're going to marry each other. And we were engaged for 6 months. And those days are getting closer and closer and closer. We know we're going to marry each other. We know that after a 45-minute ceremony, our entire relationship will be completely different and all the boundaries go out the window. We knew that. But we had made a commitment to one another. We had made a commitment to God, and we wanted to make sure that we continued on that commitment that we made. And so our boundaries, as we got closer to the wedding day, they didn't get looser. They got tighter. All of a sudden, our boundary, our curfew of 10:30 turned into 10 o'clock. And all of a sudden, the boundaries of hanging out at each other's houses changed a little bit. The way that we said goodbye to each other at the end of the day changed a little bit. We had to make these different boundaries in our relationships. And I think Evan had told me when we first had the awkward talk over bug soup, he told me, Vanessa, I don't want these boundaries to be something that we visit once and we never talk about again. And that was like the safest place for me. And guys, I think that girls just need to have that safe place. That's why we need you to lead. Because we need that safe place to be able to say, we talked about this boundary, and now that we're actually dating and in this, that's not a good boundary for me anymore. And I think we need to revisit that. And it's okay to do that. And Evan gave me permission to move those boundaries, to change them around a little bit. And, we said that was a boundary, but that's not really a good boundary because of all these other things. So let's change it and see if this works better. And then once a week, as we got closer and closer to our wedding day, once a week we had a set time on our calendar. Our phone alarms would go off at the same time that said we needed to have a boundaries talk. Once a week, it was a scheduled thing on our calendars. How are we doing? Did we come close? Do we need to change anything? No, we did great. Awesome. Let's celebrate that. And so we took the commitment that we made to each other and that purity. It wasn't a commitment to purity. It was a commitment to enjoy our marriage fully. It was a commitment to be able to give ourselves to one another fully. And I think sometimes we look at purity as something of withholding, like we're keeping this, it's hard, but that's not really what we're doing. We're saying, I want to enjoy my marriage, and I want my marriage to last. And I want to make sure that the other person that I'm with, that I don't have to think about all the other people they've been with before they're with me. And it becomes less about, well, I'm holding this away from you, and to no, I'm giving something so precious to my husband or to my wife. And like Evan said, God already has your love story all written. We were praying before we came in here, and when Evan was praying, he said, I just pray for the love stories that God's already got written for every student in this room. And although it's new to us, God already has the whole thing mapped out. And I think sometimes we forget that. And that if we can hold back in some of these other areas, we talked about last night, and the girls that met back there, that sex and love and kissing and all these things, they're not bad things. They're one of the best blessings and gifts that God's ever given us, and He's given us He's designed it to give it to us in marriage. It's not something He wants to hold from you. It's something He wants to give you fully.
So, when the Bible says, right, treat each other with absolute purity, that's what it looked like for us. Could it look like that for you? It could. We're just offering you guys a different approach to this whole thing. You might say, what? Like, no way. You're a pastor. Of course that works for you, but not for me. Guys, it's pretty simple. You just got to be intentional. You just got to think about it. I mean, the fact that Vanessa, since she was 16, had been writing in this journal, asking God to prepare her heart for her husband, asking God to bless me, that she was praying for me when I didn't even know her, showed me that this thing is for real. This marriage we have is going to last. I mean, it's for real. Like, the things I said to her on that altar are for real. And if you guys want, you can look up Evan asked Vanessa to marry him on YouTube, because our proposal is on YouTube too. We put it out there for all our friends and family to watch, so you're friends and family now, so you can watch it. And on there, I wrote a poem, and I surprised her. I flew to North Carolina where she's visiting her sister, and came in this crowded cafe. It's this French cafe, and asked everyone, to give their attention, and I had something to say to Vanessa, and I recited this poem, and I told her that she gets me. And I talked about the way she gets me, like she understands me. And I said, and then because I basically said, you should just watch the video, it's so much better than me explaining it. I said, you get me, you get to get me. All of me, from head to toe, inside and out, past, present, and future. And I said, I don't want you. I want your hand to hold.
Oh.
It's on there.
I want your good home cooking.
Yeah.
I want your hand to hold because you're so good looking.
Yeah, that was
I remember that part.
Yeah. So, the good times and the bad, I don't remember the rest. So, anyways, it's out there. But those words flowed out of a heart of just a place where I just really loved Vanessa, and I still do love her. And when you reach that point, when you prepared, and when you do fall in love, it's a beautiful thing. And I think what the world has done to this process is to make it so messy, so full of just unknowns, so full of just physical stuff that doesn't need to be there. And on our wedding day, I received a gift as well from Vanessa that I didn't expect. And it was in the form of a video that she had made for me. And to this day, is it working, by the way? Okay. And to this day, we haven't shown anyone except our close family and friends this video. We wanted to show you guys, because we're up here being transparent with you about where we came from. This video is something that I didn't know about. Vanessa prepared it, and she gave it to my mom. My mom came up to me. I was just in the room with my groomsmen. She hands me this iPad and said, Vanessa wants you to watch this. This is right before we go to walk down the aisle. And so I go in the other room and I start crying. I'm like, oh my gosh. Because this is beautiful, the things that she shares in this video. And go ahead.
Hey, mister. I just wanted to say hello, and that I know that I can't talk to you or see you today, so this was the best I could do to squeeze in some time with you. And I just wanted you to know how much I love you and how excited I am to walk down the aisle and into your life forever. And it absolutely amazes me that 26 years ago, God put on the hearts of people on the other side of the country to have one more baby girl, because he looked down and he saw you and he had your life all planned out. And literally when he birthed me into the world, he was thinking about you. And he knew that together we would be able to do so much more. Together we would have this full and complete picture of who God is and understand him so much more clearly. He knew that we wouldn't slip through the grips of his hand if we did life together. And he knew that I would frustrate you, that I would challenge you, and that we would love one another until death do us part. And along with this DVD, you also should have gotten this book. And it's a book that was given to me when I was 16 years old by my mom. And for the last 10 years, I've taken this book and written love notes to you and have prayed for you. And so I just wanted to share with you a few of the things that I wrote down and the journey that we've been on for 10 years, even though we had no idea who the other person was. And in May of 2008, I asked God to bless you today by praying God would work through me and challenge me. I pray that God is continuing to do a work in my life, so one day you'll look into my eyes and truly feel that you are blessed. In February of 2009, today I wanted to tell you that I'm so glad I said no to all those other guys, and then I said yes to you. There are so many dreams that God has placed in my heart, and I just want us to do them together. In January 8th of 2010, today I prayed for you that you would hurry the heck up. Seriously, where are you? I'm ready to lay down by you, to wake up to you, to passionately love you. I'm ready for some tangible security, for long conversations, perhaps in our underwear, and a reason to sleep in a little bit longer just because you're there. I'm ready. I'm ready for you. In April of 2011, I wrote this. The verse that comes to mind when I think about you is Joshua 24:15. But as for me and my household, we will serve the Lord. I can't wait to teach our babies about Jesus and to watch them grow into little missionaries. I can't wait to come together and make that commitment before our friends and our family, that as for us, we will be serving Jesus. I dream of the day that you'll lead our family to a deeper, authentic relationship with God. Let's do it. Let's serve the Lord together and watch our world change. And in January of 2012, with only 96 days to go until I walk down the aisle, I said, God showed me something new about myself today, that he really did create you with the ability to love me the way that my heart desires, and I'm so thankful God removed the walls, the thick walls that surrounded my heart. I'm yours. I know we can't predict any of the days ahead, but we can only hope for them. Hebrews 6:11 says that we can make certain that our hope is secure if we show the same diligence as we do now until the very end. And I commit to you, Evan, to be diligent as a lover, as a servant, as a friend, and as a child of God. My hope is sure. I love you, sweet man, a little bit more every day. And I can't wait to continue to just live out our journey and continue to write our story down and see what God's going to do through us together. But before I go, I just wanted to pray with you before we walk down the aisle together and before I'm your wife and we start this journey. So just pray with me real quick. God, I thank you so much for this man that you've blessed me with, God. And I just pray that you would, God, before we dedicate ourselves and commit ourselves to one another, God, we commit and dedicate ourselves to you. God, I pray that you would continue to be the center of our family, the center of our home. God, that our purpose in coming together would be for no other reason than to bring honor and glory to who you are, God. Use this day as a day to just teach others about you, that others might fall deeply in love with you as we have, God. We give ourselves to you. In your name I pray. Amen. I'll see you at the end of the aisle.
I made that video for Evan because I knew he got it. I think I wanted me to get it. And so I needed to give that to him for me to fully get it. That what we did was a big deal. And I say that not to elevate us, but to grasp that there's an enemy in the world. And the enemy has got such a good plan, and guess what? It's working. He's decided to pinpoint marriage as a place to attack the family. And we think that marriage, when we're 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 years old, is so far away. And it might be. But I know that the enemy is at work. And he's using things in your life at the age of 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. He's using things now that have the ability to cause harm in the marriage that is to come. He's got a plan, and it's working. And I think that this is a commitment that we just take so lightly, and we think, I'll have control when I get in those situations, and I'll be able to master this. But in the Bible, it doesn't say to resist sexual immorality. It says to flee from it. Don't even get a taste of it, because God created us to desire this very thing. He created us to enjoy this very thing. And so if we even get too close to it, it'll overtake you. And so he says to flee. And so Evan and I, as we were just thinking about this different parts of our relationship, and the things that God's done and the things that he calls people to, this was one of the big ones. Realizing that marriage is a big deal, but dating is a huge deal. Dating is what leads to marriage. Dating is what determines what you're able to give to your spouse when it comes to marriage.
Can we do a little guitar? Just like that. Anyways, I don't know if you guys have thought much about this, about like your future spouse, about marriage, but tonight I want you to think about it. Like I said in the beginning, we just wanted to show you a picture of what God has done in our lives. We just got up here and said this is how God has written our love story. What's your love story going to look like? Now, I know God doesn't give marriage to everyone. But statistics show about 90% of people on this earth will get married. So for most of you in this room, this is going to be a reality one day. And so I want us to take some time right now to find a quiet space in our hearts to really give this to God. To surrender our wills in this and ask for God's will to be done. And so I invite each and every one of you in here just to close your eyes. And on your own, spend some time talking to your dad in heaven about that person